to Hermit Woods, where there's a story in every bottle.
We're live.
We're live.
We're like live.
Live.
Like if the people that are looking at us, is that really?
He's still
he's like
trying
live.
to figure out what it means to be live. He's not
I'm not
sure.
quite sure about it. It is a conundrum.
Ken has had a long day.
The live
He's had
thing is a
long
little
day.
weird.
You have to bear with him. Hi, folks.
No, even if
Welcome
it's a short
to,
day.
Hermit Woods, our Monday Night Live. We're here again
There you
with
go.
you. Cheers. What? Hey, cheers, everybody.
Cheers,
Oh.
cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. And cheers to the audience.
All of you joining us out there in the world, please let us know in the comments
man.
what you're drinking.
That smells
we're gonna get
great,
to that.
doesn't it?
I know. We're going to get to that in a minute. So before we do get into the wine that's in our glass, thank you for joining us for another one of our Monday Night Live sessions. We really appreciate having you here for this conversation. It's so much better with you than it is without you. And a couple things for those of you who might be joining us new today. If you are joining us for the first time, right below Ken's feet is a button on YouTube
Over here?
for subscribing to our YouTube channel. Yeah, somewhere in there. And if you're on Facebook, there's a bell on your screen somewhere that you can click, and that bell will subscribe you to our Facebook channel. If you subscribe, then you will be notified when we go live, whether that be on a Monday night at 5:30, which happens almost every Monday night, or somewhere in the wilds. We might be on a ski slope.
Well, we might be in the wild, and so we can't go live.
Or that's a possibility too.
That happens.
But it's
Like PA Wilds
it's
last
more,
week.
It's more rare.
We were on
than
the
it
PA
is.
Wilds last week.
We're going to get into that.
We are.
So if you are joining us also, we'd love it if you'd make yourself known.
And let us know what you're drinking.
And let us know what you're drinking. So make a comment in the comment section, say hello, share what you're drinking, say who you are, and even where you're from, so we know where you're hailing from. And
Anything else?
And yeah, if you enjoy this broadcast,
There we go.
please like it, share it with your friends, and join us again for future broadcasts. If you're new, all of the broadcasts that we've been doing for 3 years are posted on our website. Under the events tab, there's a Facebook Live tab. If you click that, you can see every episode. So if you really want to dig in deep onto the goings on here at Hermit Woods, you can do that on our website. So with that, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about why, well, we didn't broadcast, I think the last, was it 2 weeks?
No, we broadcasted. It was 1 week in between.
Last week we
So
didn't.
last week we weren't able to broadcast. Thought we were again, but we couldn't quite. But
You know-
it was because the two of you were off traveling and having some exciting adventures.
Yes, the technology that we are dealing with here makes it pretty difficult when we're not actually physically here.
We were
with this
completely
equipment.
blocked out.
Oh,
At
yeah.
Cedar Run?
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't even text.
We were in the middle of
We couldn't
nowhere.
text.
Yeah,
It was awesome.
It was pretty, yeah.
It was great.
But nonetheless, it was not awesome that we couldn't be here with you. So we put a rerun up so that if you did join us, you could watch one of our past shows. I hope you found that interesting. But nonetheless, this was a really, really important reason that we were away last week. And we're here today to tell you the story of why we were away and what we were up to.
Because we like camping?
That's one of the reasons. It's for sure one of the reasons. It's action-packed. There's a lot of things about last week that were really interesting to me and to you for different reasons. Some of them might be more interesting than others to you as the audience.
Did you put that blog note on
That
the...
blog is listed. So everything we're going to talk about today, I wrote a story.
You can put that up, right, Marika?
It's up.
Right
the
on
link
there.
is in the description of the show.
Oh, it's in the description of the show. Okay,
I'll
great.
put it in the comments as well.
Yeah. So so I wrote a story about our adventures over the last week and posted that on our Facebook page just recently, yesterday. So if you want to read about our history, you can do
The
that.
chapters.
The chapters.
We had chapters.
Yeah,
We
but
had 5
We're
chapters.
going to talk about it here, so you don't need to go read about it. Although if you go read about it, you'll see lots of pictures that tell the
Right.
story, and a picture's worth 1,000 words, which we're not going to have time for today. So do take a look at the story if you're really interested in seeing some of the images from our journey.
I wonder how many words we actually say during a 1-hour broadcast. Each of us is speaking
Oh no.
every second a word. An hour, 1,440 seconds.
I don't know. I don't
So
think
there's
that's
over
relevant
1,000 words in an hour,
right now,
maybe?
so-
There's probably an AI thing that could count all the words in a broadcast.
Well, not even really AI, just transcription.
Or just translate it just to transcription and then the count, a word count. I just, 1,000 words a picture, so I was just sort of thinking, our 1-hour ramble is like one picture.
Right, and there's like 40 up on, so that's like 40,000
Yeah.
words.
Yeah, it's like 40,000
Even if we
words.
talked a lot, we couldn't get to that.
We couldn't even, and we talk quite a bit.
And we do. So why are we here? Why did we go to Maryland last week? So about a month ago,
It's about these 2 wines.
it's about those 2 wines. A month ago, I got an email out of the blue from a guy, Paul Viognier, who had been referred to us by Carlo DeVito, somebody who we've mentioned many times. We've actually had on our show in the past.
Yeah.
Carlo is a wine enthusiast and winemaker and former winery owner.
And spirits enthusiast
author.
and beer author. And
He's a man of many talents.
Yes.
He travels all over the East Coast, singing the songs of all of the wineries, breweries, and distilleries in the
yeah,
in the East Coast.
he's a great guy.
Really great guy. And so Carlo suggested that Paul contact us because Paul was putting together a symposium of some of the best winemakers on the eastern seaboard, from as far north as, well, in this case, New Hampshire this time.
Yep, we were
and
the
as far
furthest away.
south as Virginia.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, so he was putting a symposium together. This is something that they do every year, and I had learned about it a few years back. And I mentioned to Carlo, "What does one need to do to get an invite to this
Right.
really cool event?" And lo and behold, I guess one just needs to ask because Carlo referred Paul to us, and Paul reached out and asked if we would like to attend.
Well, you have to ask, and you have to warrant it. I mean,
Well, of course.
you can't just show up. I made some wine, and here we're going to talk about it.
Honestly, Paul wouldn't have. Carlo wouldn't have referred us to Paul.
No, of course not.
If he didn't think we warranted it, and Paul wouldn't have invited us if he didn't think we belonged.
Although it was, kudos to both of them for being open-minded enough to entertain wines that, by some people's definition, are not wines because they're not made out of grapes.
Exactly. In fact, not
For
for
them
Carlo,
to
'cause
step
Carlo's
outside
been
of it.
here, but for Paul, who's never had
Right,
our
Paul's never even
wines,
had our wine.
It was a bit of a risk for him to invite us.
It was a big risk.
Although I'm sure he trusted Carlo, he still had not had a chance to try our wine.
Well, then his colleague that puts it on, who's sort of the MC of the whole event, Joe
Joe Fiola.
Fiola at the University of Maryland, he's been here. We met up years ago. He and I have co-spoken at conferences on
did,
wines and
many
cider
times,
and stuff
yeah.
like that. And so Joe knows our wines well. We know each other well. He even brought a special bottle of wine that he shared after the conference. So each winemaker brings 2 of their favorite wines, a white and a red, or a rosé sparkling. And we did whites in the morning and reds in the afternoon. And you talk about them and present them. And
How many different winemakers were there?
there were
13.
13 total.
I have the list.
So-
We're going to go over them.
Oh, wonderful.
I want to
Yeah.
share with them.
But afterwards, people also brought some of their other wines that they're excited about. And so afterwards, you just hang out and drink wine and talk about wine. People are still spitting most of the time and
Yeah,
really
I mean, that's
digging in on
important to
tasting.
note. We drank wines for 6
Hours.
straight hours.
Yeah.
And
no alcoholic effect.
And no alcoholic
Right.
effect because we spit every wine out.
And we were
just
focused.
a tasting.
Right.
Yep.
Well, Joe brought this little half bottle with a handmade label on it, and it's Hermitage Wannabe.
I saw the picture. I got to hear the story about this one. Yeah.
Well, Joe had visited our winery,
And he's had Hermitage
and
a couple
he's had
times.
Hermitage, and it blew his mind that you could make a wine that was so reminiscent of some of the classic grape wines that he was familiar with. Joe's Italian, and he's very familiar with Italian wines, and oftentimes people refer to Hermitage as a very much like an Italian wine. And he fell in love with it, and he's been
Trying to make
speaking
it.
about it for a long
And
time.
I've given him the formula and recipe and comments and stuff like that. And
And he's been making wines
fruit wine
from
for a long time.
fruit
We had a
other
couple
than
of his
grapes
wines.
for years.
Right.
Yeah, he shared them at the
Yeah, there were really 14 because it was even. There were 7 sets of 2.
Well, there were 13 guests, but Joe
put in
was
a wine.
presenter, and he put in 2. So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yes,
there
we
were,
made it even.
there were
We did 2 wines at a
28
time.
wines all total.
Yeah.
So basically, what this was 13 winemakers and Joe, the host. We all came together at a place called the Crossvine. The
Fancy
was a
place.
really cool establishment. Just opened up. It opened up at the beginning of July, and it was a partnership between the University of Maryland and the state of Maryland and other partners as well to come together and invest in winemaking in Maryland. And the way they did that is they created a really great venue that has a farm-to-table restaurant, has a golf course on the site. It has a banquet facility and a wedding facility.
Right.
But most importantly, it has a state-of-the-art winemaking facility whereby they invite budding winemakers who don't have the resources to create their own winery and buy all of the equipment to create their own winery, but have the knowledge and skills to make wine.
Or they want to learn some skills.
Or they want to learn. So they
They
can.
offer classes.
I don't know if I don't exactly know how it works, but the really what it's about is it provides a place for budding winemakers to
launching
come
place
in
for-
and produce wine at scale that they can then sell and begin generating revenue, which would then facilitate ultimately that small
Buying the
winery
equipment.
purchasing the equipment and moving their facility to their own location. And then the next cycle of winemakers would come in and begin, and it was a large enough facility, so multiple winemakers could be working
I talked
side
to the
by
guy.
side.
I talked to the guy who runs it, the winemaker there, who was also tasting
was
and
in the
talking.
group, yeah.
And he, I asked him about the scale. You know, how small can someone start in? He said, well, we've talked quite a bit about that because, you know, whether you're making 1,000 gallons or 10 gallons, it's still cleaning vessels and moving stuff around. It takes a little bit longer to do bigger, but there's a scale, there's a benefit, like economic to the scale. He said, so if people come in and they start small, we'll entertain that. Like they want to do a half a ton or a ton of grapes, make a barrel or 2 barrels of wine. If they do that, they'll go ahead and entertain that, but if they want to do it again next season, they've got to double in scale.
Well, and their equipment
Have to step up.
suggests it's really
Yeah, they
hard
have
for them
big
to work
tanks.
at small scale. They have
Right.
big tanks,
Right.
so they would have to be it would be a very specialized situation to
Right.
work at a scale of a barrel or 2. But nonetheless, it was a gorgeous facility. If you go look at the pictures on the site, you'll see some of those pictures, and it's in Poolesville, Maryland. Like I said, it just got finished, and all of us arrived from all over the East Coast on August 1st, and the event started at 9, and all day, 2 wines at a time were presented. And each winemaker of those 2 wines would stand up and present the wine to the group, and talk about the
And we also had
making of
we
it.
also had the tech sheets. So a couple weeks before the event, Paul sent a sheet out to each winemaker for both of their wines and said, fill out the details, the chemistry, the procedure, any comments about the season or that particular vintage or things that you did that might be of interest to other winemakers. Because the idea here is to put winemakers in contact with one another so that we can hear about how we're dealing with fruit in an off year, how are we dealing with fruit sort of on the cutting edge, how are we working excuse me, with the grapes to make better wine. And that's really what it's all about. The East Coast is sort of an area that's not recognized on the planet as a source of superlative wines. Perhaps the Finger Lakes has got enough cachet now over time, but people think about California, they think about France, they think about Italy, maybe South Australia, but they don't really think about Maryland as a place for fine wine. And so this is a way of trying to, or New Hampshire. So this is a way of getting those winemakers together so we can compare notes. And I know from our contacts in the Finger Lakes that they already do that in that region. So winemakers like Phil interacts with academics at Cornell and elsewhere, other winemakers, to help raise the caliber of the products, because that does well for everybody involved. If you have good, high quality product from a region, that region is recognized. Right. And Maryland, I think, and the other states are trying to catch up in many regards to Virginia, because Virginia started this action in the 80s and said, you know what, we can grow wines here. Thomas Jefferson was a fanatic of French wines and he tried growing grapes here. We have some history, let's invest in the grapes. And it took off. And of the East Coast, I think Virginia stands out as one of those places making...
Next to New York.
Next to New York, next to the Finger Lakes, of making good wines. And Maryland is like, well, hold on here. We're right next door. We have the Blue Ridge Mountains. We've got these valleys. We've got similar climate. Let's see if we can get on this boat and go.
I think this is a good time to point out that, again, we've talked about this many times, but if you drank wine in the 60s, you snubbed your nose at Napa. Nobody drank Napa wine in the 50s and 60s. It wasn't until the early 70s that Napa started to do the same thing that Virginia did and Maryland's trying to do now. So, on the scale of time, grapes have been being made into wine in regions all over the world for thousands of years, and Napa has only been on the map for 60 or 70 years. Right. It has not been considered a fine wine.
Right, even though they've been growing for hundreds of years.
Right.
They've been making wine there for a long time.
So this is really important to note because the East Coast, the entire East Coast, is not on the wine map yet. I mean, Virginia, as you said, is close. New York,
but New York, Finger Lakes, certainly.
Yeah, certainly. New York has been making headway into this area for many years. But if you talk to people, worldwide, New York, even New York, is not usually part of the conversation. Right. There are distinct wine regions around the world that people talk about when we talk about classic wines, and it's Napa, it's Bordeaux, it's Burgundy,
France and Italy. They make 80% of the world's wine anyway, or whatever. They're just tremendous producers.
So it's important just from a sense of scale, and it's really important from our perspective because. Certainly nobody talks about New Hampshire as a wine-producing region. So just the fact that we had an invitation to be at the table for this really important event was astounding.
It was, quite honestly, very, a bit intimidating to go and show up there and to have these wines. And our Lakehouse White was like sixth, so there were like 6 pairs of wines, of really outstanding wines, that went ahead of us.
Just
Viognier and Riesling.
Does not mean a placement in line. It means we were the 6th wine to be poured.
Yeah, it was just a sequence of events. And I think they did a great job of how they lined up their wines, because they sampled them beforehand and discussed it and talked about who they're going to pair and when they're going to have what. The only one was, I think, that Tanat probably should have been at the very end.
Yeah, that was a little strange.
But anyway,
but that's important. So we drank. The group drank 6 outstanding.
12. 6 pairs.
No, before yours.
Yeah, 6 pairs. Second page.
6 pairs. Let's see. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
We were the 11th
wine.
Okay, so there were 5 pairs ahead of us.
So there were 5 pairs ahead of us. So So we tasted 11 outstanding white wines from let's see, the name of the location
cross
of these
back and forth
vineyards isn't
between them.
on that page. I don't want to cross-reference,
yeah.
but from all over the East Coast, some amazing producers. In fact, some of the producers that we visited, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But we tasted 11 really fabulous white wines made from grapes from all over the East Coast, and then
I had to
we
get
poured
up and talk about Lakehouse White.
Lakehouse White, made from peaches, rhubarb, rose hips, and quince, which was an eye-popping experience for many of the people.
I'm looking around at the other winemakers at the different tables, and I know we're all geeking out on the notes, looking at the data, and sort of listening to people talking, and we're smelling and sampling just right after they're poured. Someone may be talking, but we're still digging in on the next wine. And so I could see, like, Kathy sitting next to me, at one point she was like, peaches, quince. I could hear her out. She was so shocked, she said it out loud. And then sure enough, this wine got poured and shared around. And I got up and I gave him a little bit of a preamble, a background about us and why we went down this path of working with what grows well in our region and trying to figure out what our region brings to the glass. My philosophy of not buying grape tannins or fitting it to be a certain flavor profile, all that sort of stuff. And it was awesome. There were great comments and people were really digging. I mean, you really dig in on every little nuance of every one of these wines. And they had great comments and questions, and then they applauded.
30 people applauded your wine.
Had they been applauding for the wines beforehand?
No.
There was like maybe one or two. Over the day, I think there were maybe 5 or 6 moments of clapping, and we got 2 of those.
It was really amazing.
And that's part of, it's unique. So people, I think, were very skeptical, and and afterwards, people were talking to me and asking questions and all
Honestly,
this
you
stuff.
can say it was unique, but side by side,
I
this
think
Lakehouse White
it held up really
was
well.
every bit
Yeah.
as enjoyable to drink as any wine on that table.
What I liked about the wines that we had, every one was distinctive. Even if you had Viognier before, this was a different Viognier. This was from North Carolina, and it was done in a different way, and you're like, wow, this is really awesome. It's like when we go to have Chenin Blanc in South Africa. It's like, wow, this is a great grape.
This is why we always say the best wines in the world are consumed within 50 miles of where they're produced. Because I guarantee
You don't get them elsewhere.
very few of the wineries, if any of these wineries, are going to be distributing their wine outside of the states they're produced in. They're too small a scale. And that's not a bad thing, because 95% of the wineries in the world
Are smaller.
than us. So that's just the nature of craft wine production. It's done at a small scale in small vineyards and small wineries around the world. And that's why you don't just drink Cab, Merlot, and Chardonnay every day, because there's thousands of really wonderful, great wines. And
It was interesting.
gotta
There
go
were a
find
couple Chardonnays, and even sort of people said, oh, well, okay, we're going to talk about Chardonnay. It's almost like in the wine world, Chardonnay comes, it's almost like fruit wine. It comes with a preconceived notion. Oh, this is Chardonnay. Is it buttery or is it unoaked? And it's got its sort of set format. Oh, it's Cabernet. Is it California fruit forward or is it Bordeaux? There's a sort of something that precedes it.
Yeah.
Well,
before you
I
try.
didn't say this, but I say this all the time. 90 or 95% of the wine drank in the U.S. is those three grapes.
Right.
So that's the marketers out there and the industry out there has
Thank
shaped
goodness
our
for
ideas
marketers.
for what these 3 grapes have to offer, and that's what Americans think of when they think of wine. And there's so much, and even the Chardonnay was delicious. I'm not a fan of Chardonnay.
It was outstanding.
And that was an outstanding
That was
Chardonnay
great.
because it wasn't made in California or France.
Right.
It was made in
Right, and that's what's,
Virginia or
that's a really good, that's a key point, I think. To me, when we went tasting in the Finger Lakes and Canada and elsewhere, there were a lot of places that were trying to be California or trying to be France, and they had a certain thing that they had to make.
You find that a
And-
lot in California.
And you find that a lot out there too, for sure. But I think over the years that we've been going to the Eastern Winery Exposition, and now at this conference, every one of these wines was distinctive and spoke. You would not think any of these were California. You would not think any of these were from France. They're from somewhere else. You don't know where, but they're wine and they taste good and you haven't had them before. It's like going to a part in Italy and it's like, what grape is this? I like this wine, but I've never heard of that grape before. So these, I think that is really, it's starting to move towards what East Coast brings to the glass.
It was really striking.
really
in
great.
that Geraldine and I had been tasting, we lived in California for 11 years and wine tasted anywhere and everywhere that we could. Hundreds of wineries across the state of California.
Yeah.
So when we moved east in 93, we of course seeked out wineries just like we did in California. It became our pastime here just as
And it
well.
probably seemed foreign. It's
And
like,
it was
what
really
is this stuff?
challenging.
Yeah.
It was really hard to find wine that we found interesting. We traveled all over the Northeast.
Yeah,
Massachusetts,
you introduced me to
Connecticut.
Canada when you guys discovered those places
Yes.
up in Sutton, and
Yes.
you're like, Ken, you got to go try this stuff.
But even then, in Canada, it was it was few
It's
and far
hit and miss.
between that you would find a wine that you'd be really struck by,
right.
and they were there, but they were few and far between. And so, as you pointed out at this event, I was really struck by how consistently all 26, 28 wines that we had,
They're all great.
were all really wonderful wines. They had distinction into them of themselves for their the individual creativity coming from that part of the world, and it really, I was so excited, and I'm excited to be there and part of it because
Well, that was just awesome.
We're really on the cutting edge. I mean, you're doing what essentially nobody else. I mean, nobody at that table. There's 28 winemakers, many of them trained in California,
Right.
who traveled and have made wine all over the country and
Right.
maybe even the world.
And no one had anything like that.
And no one had ever even heard of making wine like this
Right.
in a way that you do. So it's so exciting to be at that, as you say, the tip of the wave.
Yeah.
As it's crashing
Yeah.
over into this part of the world. So super excited. Let me go over the wineries that were there.
Yeah.
So this list is actually was created from farthest away from
Yeah, they
Poolesville, Maryland.
listed in distance from the event.
Yeah, so
And we were at the top of that.
we were at the top. We
Furthest
drove the
away.
furthest, 547 miles, which
On
we'll talk about.
motorcycles.
Yeah, on motorcycles, which we're going to talk a little bit about that before we close as well. The next one was Stony Knoll Vineyards, which was in Dobson, North Carolina. A really
I
cool guy.
like that guy a lot.
He was very much akin to us. You know, he
so
was somebody
humble,
came
so-
from another background.
Yeah,
and-
I'm much more comfortable on the farm. My father bought this place, and
Yeah.
but I make this wine, and the
he
wine
had
was.
a Viognier that was just fantastic.
Ah,
Probably one of the
unbelievable.
best whites. on
I
the
think it's
table.
because he approaches it very simply.
He did. Well, similar to
And,
you.
Yeah, it's just
It's not science.
simple. It's
art.
not. A lot of some of the other ones are cooking by numbers type of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
There's sort of the Davis School approach.
And then the next two, Anthony Road and Fox Run, which is a
We've
fun
been there.
I've
story.
been to both of those.
You've been to both those too,
Yeah.
right?
All of us have been.
We're in the Anthony Road Wine Club now.
Oh, are you?
That's
Yeah.
fabulous. They were great
Is
ones.
that Craig? Is he from Anthony
I
Run?
think it was Peter. No, Peter Becraft.
Oh,
and-
Peter.
Yeah, Craig Hosbach is from Fox Run.
Craig is
Craig
from
was
Fox.
from
Yeah, Fox
right.
Run, that was one of our best experiences in the Finger Lakes, we did a tour and then a wine pairing lunch at Fox Run. That was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
They're practically across the street from one another.
Right.
Yeah.
And not
Right.
too long ago, we actually directed you to
Yeah.
that part of the world because
Yeah,
we had been there.
Kemeter's right across
And
the road.
Kemeter's right there,
Yeah.
right?
And Kemeter, the winemaker to Kemeter, which if you get to New York, you should visit this place, used to make wine for Anthony Road. But so Chuck and I and Ken had been there in 2019. I looked up the date.
Oh, that's when it was?
We had traveled through there when we were at the Eastern Winery Exposition in 19 in Syracuse, and we visited
So
all
March of
3
19,
those
okay.
wineries. Yeah, and enjoyed them all. We brought home wines. I'll bet
Oh,
you
yeah.
Chuck still has some wine from
Yeah,
that.
Chuck's always good at, that's great, I'll take a case of that.
He got a case or two from these wineries. So both of them were represented. It was really exciting because we'd been there and we were really impressed with their wine.
But
and then,
these guys were not necessarily the winemakers at that time. Some of them, they move around.
both of these winemakers were new to those locations.
At that time. So
Since
what we were
we'd been
tasting.
there.
Yeah, so what we tasted at that time was the previous winemaker.
Sure.
Maybe
but
Kemeter or
they
whoever.
were coming into a culture that was
Right.
designed around or built around making really
That's
high-quality
what's
wine.
interesting. A lot of these winemakers switch, they move. And I think that's partly how they develop their capabilities, their style, or the rest of it.
I feel like you
A lot of them are not the owners of the vineyard.
brewer.
They're the winemaker or the brewer. So
I see
someone
this a lot
else has
with
paid
breweries
for
around
everything.
here, I think.
So one of the things this has always been of concern to me, and it's not the case everywhere, but it's certainly the case here largely on the East Coast, is that the winemaker doesn't get the status I think the winemaker deserves. Winery owners want the spotlight,
Right.
and it's relatively
They're bankrolling
rare
it,
that the
and-
winemaker is the owner.
Right.
And the winemaker deserves a lot of credit for a successful winery,
Sure, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason winemakers move around is the winemaker isn't hailed by the winery as the champion of that winery. And I think that's wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
you are the winemaker here, and you need to be on the cover of Wine Spectator. Nobody else. I don't need to be. I just do the marketing. I just sell stuff. You make this great stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, it is always the
partnership,
case.
of
It's a
course.
partnership.
It's a partnership,
Right.
of course. But I think that's part of the reason a lot of winemakers move around is that
Yeah.
they don't get the.
It may be too that
recognition
they develop new understandings, new ideas. It's like the different winemakers who have moved through here
Well,
as assistant. I learned from them, they learned from me, and
One of the Brianna Lopez was one of the winemakers. She was
Yeah,
working
she was
for
out in California,
Croteau
right?
Vineyards. She was working for Silver Oaks.
for Silver Oak.
She was making $300 bottles of wine. She was at the, what you would think would be the pinnacle of the winemaking world, working for some of the
Gordon and I went to Silver Oak in 1986.
yeah. So it's one of the finest
the top,
wineries
yeah.
in Napa, and she chose to leave there to go to Croteau Vineyards in Maryland. And I asked her why. I said, what were you thinking? You left the pinnacle.
Right.
You were working in Napa with some of the finest winemakers in the world. And she said, everything they do in Napa is made a recipe. They're targeting a recipe. They're targeting something that they've done for a long time.
Yep.
Everybody in Napa does it.
New oak, fruit
This
forward.
is what they want to do. I get to be myself now. I get to make wines that I get to create.
Well, she's
craft.
also got a lot of challenges. I mean,
Well,
dealing with East Coast harvests, East Coast issues is a lot harder than Napa. That's one of the things that Mondavi recognized about Napa is that Bordeaux gets a good year every 4 years. Napa, every single year, conditions are pretty damn bang on for growing Cabernet and Chardonnay.
But
and
if you're passionate
Sauv
about what
Blanc.
you're doing, you seek those challenges.
Well, that's what I think, or maybe there's certain people that just like, they're fine with that. I have the best fruit on the planet and I'm gonna nuance it and I'm gonna just make this thing. It's gonna be $3,000 a bottle.
Well, back
and
to
other
the-
people go, you know what? I'm gonna let all those other people nuance. I wanna go to a place where it's new, it's young, it's the Wild West. And Maryland's the Wild West.
And also back to my earlier point, how much attention do you think Brianna got when Silver Oaks went out and won their gold medals at all the
Zero.
competitions?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she not only was making wine to recipe, somebody else's recipe, she didn't get recognition when she did a good job. I mean, I'm sure she did, but not at the scale or that she will.
Right, that could
when
be-
she's
that
gonna
could be it.
highlight- She's going to be highlighted as somebody taking a very challenging region with very challenging fruit and turning it into something.
There
really,
are some
really
cool
interesting.
new ideas and things happening out in California, but that's another
Well, sure.
discussion.
We'll have another show. So let's keep going down the list because we've got more. Heron Hill Wineries from Hammondport, New York.
I remember that one being on our list. But
Have
it's
you
not
been
one-
there?
No, I don't think we ended up getting
I haven't been there either.
It was definitely on the list of ones that we wanted to hit, but I think we didn't make it to Heron Hill.
Benedus Vineyards in Pittstown, New Jersey. Maple Springs Vineyard in Bechlesville, Pennsylvania. I can't really pronounce that word very well. Vox Venetti, which is right near
Vox
Lancaster,
Venetti, yeah.
where in Pennsylvania, where we go to every year. Waltz Vineyards in Manheim, Pennsylvania. Croteau Vineyards in Maryland. Arterra Wines in Virginia, the Wine Collective, and that's the Wine
Collective
is
at
the
Crossvines.
It's actually right near Crossvines.
Okay.
He's the winemaker at the Wine Collective, which is in Baltimore.
It's in Baltimore.
And
All
his
right.
name was John Levenberg.
John, right.
And then Low Vineyards in Mount Airy, Maryland, and then Joe Fiola, of course, from the University of Maryland, was not making wine commercially. He's making wine
Yeah.
from test vineyards all over.
There's sometimes he gets to, well, I took these and I froze them and then I chopped them up and I did this and I did that, and everybody's looking at each other like, do that at a 5-ton scale.
Yeah, exactly.
There's some things that,
He's in the lab, yeah.
as I'm in the midst of pitting 1,500 pounds of peaches right now.
Oh, yeah, speaking of, I wanted to, we should draw attention to one of the things that we're eating
Yeah,
tonight.
the peaches.
Because we're drinking Lakehouse White, and you were in the process, I assume, of making
Right,
Lakehouse White.
I'm up on the scaffolding, deep pitting peaches, dropping them into the fermenter after a few days of ripening and culling out the ones that had issues. And Marika's like, oh, let's get some peaches for the show. And I said, great, perfect.
Well, because peaches are in Lakehouse White, and they actually go really well with it, I find. Imagine that. So, so the reason we're drinking Lakehouse White, if we didn't mention this already, was this was the first wine that was part of the morning session when we were talking about white wines. It was the Lakehouse
The
White.
11th.
And like I said, it held up beautifully. It was a great...
It did, when it poured, I put these wines together and taste these wines and baby these wines along and blend and balance and eventually bottle them. But that's kind of in a vacuum, down in the cellar, doing my thing. And so whenever you have things referentially next to other stuff, it's always different. So our palates are set. We've already gone through 10 different white wines that have different flavor profiles, different stories, different backgrounds, different philosophies. And then Lakehouse White. And I gave it a quick smell before I got up to talk about it. I'm like, okay, this is fine. It's expressive, it's aromatic, it's unique. So it's like the ones that preceded it. It's got those same sort of basic unique character to it, which was good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Except for the Pinot Blanc. But the Pinot Blanc was a story in itself. The second or third or fourth wine was done...
Fox Run, right?
Yeah, it was done by...
Craig. Fox Run Vineyards.
No, not Craig. The other guy that sat at our table. John? Anyway, what he wanted to talk about was the fact
Heron
that...
Hill.
Heron
Pinot
Hill.
Blanc. Heron Hill is the second wine.
Pinot Blanc.
That was Jordan Harris.
Jordan.
From Hammondport, New
So
York.
Jordan sat at our table, and Jordan said, you know what? You would think I'd bring a Riesling. Everybody brings a Riesling from the Finger Lakes.
He actually was told he couldn't bring a Riesling.
But yeah,
Because
maybe,
Fox Run and Anthony Rowe.
yeah, we're already bringing. Yeah, maybe they.
I bet the Finger Lakes guys all got together and...
The Paul decided.
Oh, he took...
What? Yeah, Paul said this is the area you need to cover.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah.
Right.
Interesting,
But
yeah.
he chose the 21 vintage or 22 vintage, whatever it was, that had all sorts of issues. The season was just terrible. They had bad temperature, bad rain at the wrong time, all this stuff. And he said, so I got all this compromised fruit in, and I got to deal with it. And he said, so I thought I'd bring that along to give you an example of the worst possible fruit to deal with, and you got to try to make something that's workable in the bottle. And so he told us all this stuff where you're basically gating back all of the stuff and just corralling it into something that's going to be a reasonable wine. It's not going to be a great wine, but it's going to be a reasonable wine.
And it was.
And it was.
It was a reasonable
That's
wine.
actually,
But it was the one that was the step
pretty
down
brave.
of all the rest. It was,
pretty
but
brave.
it's a
It's a
perfect.
learning
It was
tool.
a
makes
perfect
it's a-
learning
yeah,
experience.
for the point of this. This wasn't an award show. This wasn't to
No,
try and
not at all.
be the best wine there. Though I mean, getting
Right.
applause is pretty great, but it's more about learning from each other and having those sorts of discussions about what are your problems and what are you dealing
Right.
with and how did we fix it, and that's
Right.
And yeah, you're right. It's brave, but probably but very valuable.
And that's it really, there was a lot of this conversation going on about natural wines and those producers there. Who were
Yep, the
talking
guy
about
from
the
Arterra,
least-
yeah.
the least manipulative of the winemakers,
Yeah.
if you will. But what is always fascinating to me when I enter into this conversation, and we can have a show about this again. We've had them in the past, but honestly, there are literally thousands of choices that a winemaker has to make from when that fruit arrives at the back door of the winery to when it goes into the bottle. And I don't care, natural or not natural, the winemaker's playing a really, really important role in making really important decisions every step of the way. And so what's natural at this point?
Right.
Mother Nature did not produce that wine.
Yeah, this is
Mother
like-
Nature
this is-
would have just, found it would have been an apple rotting at the bottom of a tree, turning into alcohol,
Yeah,
making deer drunk. That's Mother Nature. This is wine. It's a
Right.
very refined beverage that's been refined over thousands of years. What's natural about it? Relatively little in my mind. But anyway, this is a whole nother show. We'll have to talk about this at another time.
The philosophy.
Yeah, is it great? And probably the godfather in my head of natural wine would Gideon Beanstalk in California. I mean, he's for sure the closest to the concept of natural wine.
But he
I've
doesn't
ever
push it
seen.
that way. He's not,
No,
pushing it that way. He's just trying to make really good wine.
because he too also is making lots of
He's
decisions.
just making
Although
constant.
he would suggest most of them are made in the vineyard, and
Yeah,
he's
all in the
right
vineyard,
about
right.
that largely. But he still makes lots of decisions in the vineyard. So we
Yeah,
don't
15
have much
minutes,
time
so-
left. The second wine for the afternoon that we poured was the 2020 Hermitage. Was it 20? Mm-hmm. And again, you got to remember we had. Let's see, where did that fall? Oh, this was the third wine. So you were early up in the shoot for the afternoon
Right.
tasting.
Right.
That was the third red wine next to a Blanc de Noir and a Fox Run dry rosé, and then the Hermitage, and
Right.
then we went on to drink a wide variety of Cab Franc.
Yeah, Merlots and Cab and
We had some Cabernet Sauvignon, a couple of those, a Tannat, a Petit Verdot,
That's a
Chambourchin.
nut.
So it was, yeah, the Tannat was something. So there was, I liked the guy's attitude about it too.
He's great. He followed up with an email to me.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So actually, so you guys, if anybody interested, I'm gonna post this list.
Yeah, you should post it.
Yeah, so everybody who wants to try any of the wines that were presented here, many of these wines can be bought on Vino Shipper from the winery directly, and you could try them yourself. What's that?
I think that the Riesling Art Series from Anthony Road, I think we had a bottle of that.
You had a bottle? Yeah. So Ken got up and presented the story of Hermitage. Remember we mentioned earlier, Joe Fiola he brought a wine called
Hermitage Wannabe.
There's a picture of that up there on the internet. And I have so much respect for Joe.
He's such a great guy.
He's
Great
just so
attitude.
humble.
And so supportive. A number of the winemakers there, you could tell, they had been in contact with him, questioning ideas, how to deal with the low bricks or the high acid or whatever it was coming through. So he helps guide them in winemaking decisions.
Sure, he's a smart
So
guy.
he's a super smart guy.
He's dug deep into this
Yeah.
topic for a long time, so it was really great to have him there. Afternoon, again, in the presentation of the Hermitage, again, the whole room applauded at the end of the sample.
And Richard Leahy, another
I was
long-standing
gonna mention it.
colleague of ours, who again was a fantastic that he was going to be there for this event. We didn't know that beforehand. Paul contacted us. We knew that Carlo had mentioned us to him, but then he mentioned Joe was, collaborating on it with him, and I said, "Oh, great, Joe already knows our wines and stuff." And then he goes, "And Richard Leahy will be there. Do you know him?" I said, "Oh, sure, I know him. He's been up here. We've worked with Richard. We've been to every EWE since its inception in 2011, or 2012.
2012.
And so Richard was there, and after I presented the Hermitage, told him how I created it, how we got the label approved, and people said, Jordan said, I wouldn't change anything about this wine, Ken. It's just spot on. It's just great, nice balance. And he says, and I don't know how you get away with such low sulfur levels. We could never do that here. So we talked about ins and outs of different aspects of it.
To learn, right?
Right,
To
that's
learn
what you do. You
other
talk about
winemakers
these
are
different
doing
things.
and how they achieve what they achieve.
Yeah, and so Richard told the story because, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, when Richard came up here and tried our wines, he said, oh, this Hermitage reminds me of Rhone red blends, you know, that are Grenache based. He says, you know what, if you guys are up for it, I have some colleagues down in Virginia, somms and restaurant owners that are into wine and into food. I'd like to do a blind tasting with your Hermitage with some produced grape wines that have a similar sort of profile. And I'm going to brown bag them, and I'm going to tell everybody in the audience that's going to do the tasting that one of them is a ringer. Something that's a little different about it. And he told the story to everybody at this meeting, and how at the end, the Hermitage tied for something about its origin or something like that, but it won on the people's favorite. So, 5 out of 8 chose it as their favorite Rhone red blend.
Not knowing it was made from something.
Not knowing that there were no grapes in it at all.
Made in New Hampshire.
Because he was comparing this not just to, we had grape, there were wines from Australia, from
Right.
California, from Spain.
Yeah, you had a Spanish,
You had world
California Rhone blend.
wines.
Yeah, they're
And
all
we've done
Rhone
that
blend.
here. We got to do it again.
You did that, yeah.
We should do that with the 2020.
You did that again at some point, not long after Richard did it.
Right, we did
and
it
some
here
of our
with
club members were here.
We
Yeah.
need to do that again. We need a club member event. We need to put the 2020 Hermitage up against some classic grape wines in a blind tasting. Will you guys come if we do this again? I hope so. We're going to do this again. We're going to do that this winter.
Sounds good.
Do we have some of that? How many bottles of the 2020 do we have left?
Of which one?
2020 Hermitage.
They haven't even released it
Oh,
yet.
I hadn't even released it.
We have plenty left.
Gary's in.
Gary's in. Good. We're doing this winter. We're
Awesome,
going to have a
Gary.
blind tasting, our Hermitage.
Gary, thank you for being such a supportive
Yes.
champion of ours.
Yes, thank
It's
you.
awesome.
We'll do it up here. It'll be a really great event.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be fun. This winter, right? We're going to do this.
Yep.
All right.
We do, actually, you mentioned Gary, so we should take a moment to thank our audience. We've got...
We could do a Red Scare
Jen
Burgundy
Seuss is in,
challenge.
But we've got our usual crowd here. Priscilla's here, Christina's here, my mom's in. And Drew LeBlanc says he remembers you making beer in the basement, and now look at you. With some hearts. So yeah. And Chuck actually joined from Tokyo.
Oh,
I don't know if he's
great.
still on, but
Yeah.
he was earlier.
He's in Japan now?
Yeah. He flew in from Tokyo.
I need to sleep extra just for him,
Just
just to help
a
him
few
out.
winks for Chuck tonight.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Otherwise, people were drinking other things. Chuck was drinking water.
Good for him. He's a pilot.
It's good.
You're safe flying with Chuck.
That's
I promise
pretty
you.
rare.
Well, he's flying. He's working. He's a very studious worker.
Yes.
So I will post. I will post the wines and the winemakers from this list in the YouTube description and on the Facebook page, so that everybody's interested in learning more about these, they can. It was an outstanding event. But before we close the show, I want to talk about what's also was really outstanding about this adventure.
Camping.
Well, more than camping, so many things. So first of all, I should point out that Ken and I had purchased tickets to go race our motorcycles around a racetrack.
We did a show on that last year.
Yeah, in Palmer, Mass.
On August 1st.
On August 1st, and we were all
We
excited.
bought them 6 months ago.
We bought them a long time ago, and then this opportunity came up, and I sent a note to Ken. I said, Ken, you think maybe we should bag the race around the track and go to Maryland for this wine event?
I did say yes.
And he said yes without hesitation, which is what I was hoping he would say.
Yep.
And so we just sold our tickets to the racetrack event. It'll be there next year. We'll go again for sure. But we chose to go to this wine event instead of this really exciting motorcycle event, which was an experience of a lifetime in and of itself. And so we just said, if we're going to do this, we got to ride our motorcycle. We got to make this a motorcycle event in and of itself.
Oh, that was difficult. So difficult.
Yeah, so difficult. So the two of us rode our bikes down, and not only did we do that, we made a real adventure out of it.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
There's a motorcycle trail called the BDR, and one in particular, the Mid-Atlantic BDR. It's the Backcountry Discovery Route, And it was our goal, since the BDR sort of heads a north to south route right through Maryland and Virginia, we thought, let's see if we can pick up a few sections of the BDR on our way down and on our way back. So sure enough, we made a beeline for just south of Corning, New York, on the border of Pennsylvania, Lawrenceville. I always remember this because
Chuck's last name.
So we started the trail on Lawrenceville and started a 200-mile adventure down the tiniest little back roads of the mountains of Pennsylvania through the Pennsylvania.
I thought we were just going to go
Canyon.
50 miles because we've already done 400 miles.
We did 400
to get
miles
to Corning.
there.
And I thought we were just going to do 50 miles to the campground. You know, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
No.
But we hit a gravel road and and the weather was beautiful. I mean, Sunday was the beginning of the perfect classic New England summer
5 days
weather.
of riding
Cool in the
without
evening, clear and sunny during the day.
It was a gorgeous week.
It was just gorgeous every day. It was just perfect.
So we had a great adventure. I'm not going to
we
go
just
into
kept
all
riding.
the details. Like I said, it's the story of our adventure is on our Facebook page, so you can go and read it.
Well, I
and
want to
see
talk
pictures.
about one thing
Yeah.
during that event. Because we had driven all the way out there, got to Lawrenceville, thought we could gear up with some food for dinner at camping, but there was nothing in Lawrenceville. So we said, well, let's go down near the campground. Maybe there'll be a camp store. We'll figure something out for food. So we carried on, and we lost connection to cell service, so we really didn't know where we were. The GPS told us that we were still on the right route.
In the middle of nowhere.
Well, we knew we were in the middle of nowhere. We were just following these gravel roads. And we finally get down to a little town, and everything's closed. It's a Sunday evening, 6 o'clock, but there's a campground there. So we go around to the campground, and we pull into the campground, and we figure, well, I got a bag of granola. And Bob goes, well, I've got something to share with you, Ken. I'm like, what? And so he pulls out, he's been carrying on the motorcycle the whole day, a 2009 Barolo. So this is a very nice bottle of wine. And so that's perfect. That's what we had for dinner. And that was it. Nothing else happened then.
No, nothing else happened. It was actually an amazing night.
It was an amazing
And
night.
we had some amazing neighbors that really made that night special, and I just sent them a 6-pack of wine
Great,
on me.
great.
That's the note I sent you.
Oh
today.
yeah, you need to share the tasting notes. I think. that
We
you
did a
sent me.
bourbon tasting.
I couldn't access it, but
Tasting notes? I
you
shared
sent me
it.
a document, but I can't access it. You need to give it.
I did.
Oh,
We'll talk
I'll try
about it later.
Anyway,
We-
but yeah,
so-
it'll go up.
We
So-
did it. We did a tasting on a picnic bench
bourbon
at 10 o'clock
tasting.
at night at bourbons. And the guy there, one of the two families, he pulls out this little black zipper closed thing with this little Chinese-like little urn and opens it up and takes these little things out. And this is a sample of a single barrel of bourbon that he went and bought because he has a bourbon enthusiast club that he's president of. And they buy barrels of bourbon and repackage it for themselves or whatever they do. And he was sharing that at a campground in the middle of nowhere.
The club.
No, it's out of Pennsylvania, but no.
But I've heard of this sort of thing. Like there are
People do that sort of
do
stuff.
like
There's only like
podcasts
60
and things,
people.
and they
Right.
do this sort of barrel selection. Or yeah,
I think Matt Dinette's going to start something like that. You know, when he buys barrels of Red Scare and
Good for him. We should have a barrel program. He's been telling us that for a few years.
I know.
So this was the first chapter. The week's ride I broke up into 4 chapters. The first chapter was this. It was Ken and I having this amazing experience with these new people we met in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and completing in the end 2 full sections, section 9 and 8 of the BDR, 200 miles of the tiniest dirt roads on the planet. And then we bombed down to Maryland, and the chapter 2 was the outstanding event where we shared our wines and we talked all about that. And then chapter 3, I have close friends that I've been friends with 30 years, living about 45 minutes from where our event
In
was.
Silver Spring,
So
yeah.
we got to spend an evening with close friends in Maryland, John and Heidi, and we had a dinner with them.
Great
and
to
spent
see
the
them.
night. And then the next morning, the next chapter
Gabo and Rodrigue.
Yes, chapter 4, Gabo and Rodrigo. two gentlemen we met at a motorcycle class that we took in Virginia 2 months ago. We've talked about this before. And these great people, and they were from Silver Springs. So we said, well, we're going to be in
Well, they're
Silver
from
Springs.
Bolivia.
No, they're from Bolivia, right, but they live in Silver Springs right now.
Right.
And you have Bolivian in your
I'm a
heritage.
quarter Bolivian.
Quarter Bolivian. Your mom's from she's
My
half
mom's
Bolivian.
dad is
Yeah.
Bolivian. Didn't even speak English.
I know. So this was so cool. We sent them a note and said we're going to be in Silver Springs. We're going to head north and do some more of the BDR. Would you like to join us? And they were enthusiastically on board. And we met them on Wednesday morning.
They taught us a little bit about how to ride on the highway
They
in a
did.
group.
They were very
How to do
talented
that.
riders. We rode for an entire day with these
Half
two
a section
guys.
5 and half a section 6.
Yeah, and ended up at a campground and had a really wonderful evening sitting around the campfire, getting to know these two guys that we met relatively briefly in the training.
Yeah.
And we became great friends. We'll be in touch with
Yeah,
them.
they're great people.
And so that was chapter 4. Chapter 5 was the least enjoyable of all of the chapters because we had so much fun on this journey and took so much time relishing with our friends and wine and getting to know people and riding the BDR.
Thursday morning, we woke up, in the campground
At
with
7
the
o'clock in
sound
the morning.
of owls and birds and all
the
this
middle
stuff.
of the
and
woods.
knowing that you needed to be here by 7 p.m.
6.
Well, 7 was the absolute. Give the
latest, yeah.
absolute latest.
And we did it. We rode. We've never done this. I've never done this before. This was
I've never done this
mind-blowing.
before.
We got on our
Never do it again.
motorcycles.
500 miles straight.
And we drove 530 miles straight, only stopping for gas, which is unheard of. I mean,
Yeah.
we foregoed beer stops
I know.
to be here
I was very proud of you.
for the 6 o'clock
Very
show,
proud of you.
7 o'clock show. It was very hard.
It's important. We're
And not only
going
did
to
we
go cross
ride
country.
for 5 hours on the freeway. We did it through the New York, the Metro New York area at 3 o'clock.
Tappan Zee Bridge.
In the afternoon, yeah. So that was another chapter in and of itself, but exciting nonetheless. I learned that I would, believe it or not, prefer to be riding on the seat of a motorcycle for 9 hours
Than a
I
car.
would a car, which is I
that
never
is
would have
surprising.
guessed that, but that's I've
I
done both.
wasn't as exhausted the next day either. Like when we came back from our adventure riding down before, I was really zonked for a couple of days.
Yeah, well, that was 3 hours of
But-
riding in the grass in the woods. And
Well, no, but when we
manipulating
came
big
back, we
bikes.
basically had a straight up ride without much in the way of challenge. And we were pretty wiped out after that. I think we're actually getting our
getting practiced.
getting our chops.
Our mojo,
Yeah.
our motorcycle Joe.
Our mojo.
So,
MC Joe.
That's it. So if you this story, did you post it?
I did.
She posted a link in the comments, and it's also in the description of the broadcast, and it's on our Hermit Woods Facebook page. Includes pictures, and I wrote all about all the little chapters and the details. So
That was great because it was so nice when I saw this, when you sent that link to Chuck and I, when you had finished your draft, and check this out. And I was like, oh my God, he went ahead and did this. It's so awesome because we're driving back up and he's like, Ken, because we're talking in our communication system in our helmets the whole time.
by the way, makes it
which just
makes it doable.
It's key. I
If we
mean, that's
didn't
why
have
we
that, it would
that's
be
why we
very
did this.
different.
No, I don't think we would even be doing this if we didn't have that. And I remember when Heidi's like, so what do you guys do? Do you like talk? And we're like,
For 9 straight hours.
Yeah, pretty much we do. She's like, wow, really? All the time?
Steve gets mad at me if I talk too
But
much.
we're riding back up. We're on the highway. We're going different places, and Bob's reminiscing about the time and different things. He says, "This is like chapters, Ken. We had the chapter before. We had the chapter at the wine thing. We had the next chapter with Galbo,
Good job.
and that was it."
Yeah, no, so all the chapters, 1 through 5, are written about, so go and enjoy them. And thank you again for joining us. And if you like this broadcast, please like the Facebook post or like thumbs up for YouTube. Share with your friends if you think they'll be interested in this topic. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, next Monday, 5:30.
Looks like
we will be
might,
here.
We might have a live audience next week. Christina's up in the area. And
Oh, fabulous!
Join us.
We love it when we have live wine.
Nice.
Oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do
something
next week?
special. I had an idea actually. I'll let you know after we get off the broadcast.
Oh, boy.
It's just, it just started percolating
That's a
up.
tease right there. Is what he
Yes.
just did. It's just a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about it after we're off the
Exactly.
broadcast.
Tune in next Monday
That's
at
next
5:30
Monday,
and learn
yes.
all about it.
Whether you tune in live or I can actually be here in person.
There you go.
Yeah.
See ya.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great evening.
So you had an idea, huh?
I got an idea.
You do? You don't need the microphone if you got an
Don't
idea.
tell it. Don't tell it yet.
Don't tell it.
Find it.
What do you mean? You
It
can't
might be
find
live.
Do you have a new one?
The new what?
Exit.
It's not an exit.
Is it the same system?
It's supposed to be exit page. There it is. You gotta.
Isn't this the same system as always?
Bye.